say that. Do you want me to put the registration link back on the website or not?
Yeah, because we have public sessions.
Give me a second to do that.
Okay.
And I am going to.
We are out of executive session. Agenda item number 7 is the COVID-19 update.
So it's been a week since we met last. Certainly I would say that the perception and the thinking around obvious news items are also hitting our front porch as it relates to community spread and increase in numbers. Today alone, we had multiple situations in which I had to follow up on. Actually began yesterday late, around 5:30 p.m. I got a notice from McMahon School about a potential scenario, and we had to look into that. State officials, all of that, which is trickier on a Sunday night and a Monday morning than middle of the week. But we worked through it, and out of an abundance of caution, I think we took the appropriate steps with McMahon. We later found out, as I shared with you all by email and updated community letters, that the close contact was in fact not Monday, Tuesday, because of the nature of which the student had symptoms with their potential for exposure. This is according to CDC tracers, contact tracers, that when he was at school Monday and Tuesday, he was not presenting a situation in which others would need to quarantine being around him. And so we did some retracting of communication today. All the families were communicated with directly. I want to thank the staff and nurse at McMahon. They really did a good job today. We also had a situation connected to the middle school in which a building-based sub, this is someone who comes in on a daily basis, was at work and then ended up leaving at the end of the day last Tuesday with some symptoms, and went and got tested and got results this morning. And so we were right on top of that scenario. I'm not saying it's a good thing. Certainly it's not a good thing, but I'm pleased with our ability to contact trace in this district and be responsive and communicate. And I would say that top to bottom, students, parents, our teachers, our staff, administration, and community have all been very receptive to, okay, so that's the information, and we have to react and do what we need to do. We haven't had any parents question things or challenge us. It's really been very good. I've been impressed with the community and their commitment to following through with our plans. So that's very helpful. I do want to let you know that I'm monitoring very closely some of our staffing levels, and I do think the community spread is out there. I've heard of a number of situations in which someone has stepped away to go get tested, and they don't attend work while they're waiting for the test results. So we're starting to get into that ratio. McMahon was real close today because that scenario was looking at impacting 10 or more staff. And then what also happened with that was connected to, and I'll avoid the name for public purposes, it's not my business to share, but there was a daycare that was impacted with the scenario from McMahon, because that student attends a daycare on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the remote days of the hybrid plan. And so on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the student was considered by the contact tracers as someone who, if you were in close contact on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that you should quarantine for 2 weeks. And so we followed their guidelines and reached out to daycare, which then prompted a communication cycle because students at that daycare actually attend multiple of our schools. We've reached all of those families. We have our plan in place. Principals are notifying the teachers right now, so the teachers know which of their kids might need a little bit extra while they're quarantined. And we keep looking at it. The staffing numbers from a community spread perspective, if we have this continued uptake of community spread, we will get to a place where we will have to close the school. If the McMahon situation stayed what it was this morning and the information did not change, we would be having a discussion tonight about me probably not having school at McMahon tomorrow. Decision that I would have had to have made during the day today if our staffing patterns were trajectory that way, because we would not have been able to cover all the kids in the building. So I want to be clear with you that the numbers are pretty real, and we're monitoring a number of situations. We're staying on our toes, we're staying vigilant with it. We have plans, we have tracing, and we can quarantine. But if we have another situation like that, it could tip the scale, or we cancel school. One thing I learned last night, this morning, is none of these situations are black and white. They all have a bunch of gray to them. Finding out yesterday at 5:30, you think that's not too bad. We'll try to figure this out right now. We can let people know if there's no school tomorrow. But state officials were tied up chasing other things, and we didn't hear back from them until this morning. Actually made the decision to start communicating with families and have people quarantine before we had formal word from the state, because we had spoken to the parent, we knew it was factual, we had seen the result, and took the steps that we knew the state would take. And then when we did find out from them later in the morning, they agreed, and then contact tracers got more information about the case and they shifted. So we respond. I think people are happy to be back in school, teachers and students, for tomorrow. So that's where that one landed. But we continue to be responsive to these things. In addition to that, I would say that COVID-19 has spilled us into a situation where we have to be very mindful and responsive about what the needs of staff are. I think this committee took some strong steps last week to try to alleviate some of the pressures that exist for teachers. We did communicate that out early last week. Last Wednesday was our first non-student or non-instructional day, where we try to give people some time to do their prep or what they need to do as professionals. Feedback was mixed. There were some people who didn't want to lose that opportunity with their kids. But I would say that from a listening gauge, from both emails, phone calls, and people that I've seen, people didn't want to lose the Wednesday, but it was nice to also have time to do work that they've been needing to do. Pushing off expectations like the Google Level 1 trainer certification assessment, that's been pushed off. So if anybody's confused about that, please see the letter. But we don't have that date hanging over people anymore. And we're looking at working with people to make sure they have the skills they need. So those things are taking effect, those different initiatives, looking at our pacing guides and how we can scale things back to make it more reasonable from a manageable perspective. And so I think we're moving in the right direction, but we've got to see what some of these things will have for an impact. Have a listening piece Thursday night with teachers. It's an optional Zoom. I'll do more if I need to on those platforms, but Karen and I have been talking a lot about making sure that we have consistent platforms for people to share their concerns, share their voice, so we can continue to bring things to all of you as you all hear things from people, and continue to be responsive and to be looking at the situations we have ahead of us and do our very best to take care of people.
Ms. Hawkins.
So just a quick, semi 6 shades of Kevin Bacon here. I'm actually absent tonight and working from home because of a connection through the daycare that affected the McMahon student. So just a reminder to everybody to be aware of which connections you have where, because it can sneak up on you.
Ms. Wright.
Thank you. So I Sorry. I recall the superintendent asking for some time and when we have to move either a school building or the entire district to remote. I'm just wondering, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a few days for folks to kind of get their bearings because it's going to be difficult. I guess my question is, has a remote plan been developed so it is more universal? I do worry that I think it's awesome to give building leaders autonomy in how they run their institutions, but I wonder about disparities and inequities being exacerbated by a move to remote across different schools and what that looks like. So I guess it doesn't have to be the same plan for every school site, but are there written plans in place so building administrators and district administrators know what step is next if that decision has to be made?
So, Karen, I know you work closely with some principals on this. We talked about this last week, after this meeting last week, just to try to build that framework for what it looked like. And Karen, do you want to chime in on just some of the pieces that I know you worked hard on?
Yeah, so we have our structure or our framework for our cohort C students who are completely remote. And there are a few pieces that we have learned and we need to add and adjust. And I'm working on making those changes to the document that's on the website currently. But the short answer is what the plan and the outline is in our framework for cohort C would be what we would expect of all students and all staff if we were to go remote.
Awesome. And I just want to add, if it's all right, I think the decision to use an abundance of caution last night into this morning and make the decision to pause on having those folks come in for today was a wise one. These situations seem so complex, and as Ms. Hawkins just said, you never know how you might be connected to these things. And I just want to applaud that effort from whoever was making those calls overnight. And I think you all are doing such an astute job of following up on these things as they arise. I, again, will always support something that looks towards moving us more remote than in person. But I think the work that's being done is capable and responsible work. So I just want that appreciation to be known.
Mr. Driscoll.
Yeah, I want to echo the sentiments that our administration, that our district leadership, that our building leaders, and that teachers and ed techs and support staff are really doing incredible work to make this as safe as possible. But I also have to say that I believe that it is not safe. It is safer than it would be if people weren't trying and working really hard, but it's still not safe. And you know, this state is, I said last week we were at the worst point that we've been, and that was the worst point that we've been then. But now we're at the worst point that we've been now, and there's every reason to believe that next week we're going to be at the worst point that we had been then. I don't see how we can continue to responsibly bring people into school with the pandemic raging, with growth in cases exponential, and with the rate of positive tests in the state of Maine dramatically increasing, which is the most concerning element of all of this, because it means we're not catching all the cases that there are. And so, you know, I'm concerned that we are only going to, this body is only going to move in that direction when it's forced to by the state. The state's only going to do it after whatever body count has already accumulated, when we can all see the trajectory is going in that direction. And so I really, really urge my colleagues to reflect on this, especially in light of the recent developments, that it seems like the possibility of having a vaccine before the end of this school year is relatively promising. So we're not talking about the prospect of being remote over multiple years. If that was the case, I think there'd be a different calculation, but the next 3, 4, 5 months could be the extent of this. And I'd prefer to have as many people alive at the end of that as we can possibly have.
Mr. Putman?
So, I guess, under the heading of hoping for the best and planning for the worst, I think hoping for the best, I still look at it, that Maine is still the second safest state in the country, and that northern New England is the safest place in the country. And even with our tripling spike that the Lewiston Auburn area's seen, we're still a minute percentage of less than 1% of what Massachusetts endured. And that I think when we look at this, we have to have a perspective on the expectations. And I think that's where I would kind of lean heavily to the state to say, I think the state's been reasonable what they've done. There's some things I disagree, but I mean, I think there's guidance there. And that's the positive part of going to preparing for worst case scenario. Simple question, Jake. When the time, if and when the time comes for remote learning, are you going to be making that recommendation to us, or are you going to be expecting us to make that recommendation to you?
I think it can go both ways because of how we are taking in information to be responsive. But I'll say with full confidence, I have no hesitation. If the numbers are stacking up and we look at staffing abilities and properly supervising our kids and just inflow, outflow, and the number of people, there's metrics in between as well that might lead to a school being closed. I'm ready to pull that trigger if I need to. If I have the information available, certainly I'd reach out to the chair, we'd have a conversation, but I'm ready to pull that trigger if we need to. Had a lot of thoughts last night and today with the different situations that popped up about how if this keeps pulsing that way, then I may be compelled to do so, and I'm willing to do that. But I would also say that as a committee, I mean, you have that authority to make those decisions as well, and we'll carry them out. We do have outbreak measures. Those are in place. The CDC and the state officials connected to DOE and the state nurse have been, I think, very good at communicating and being supportive with the details and taking the safe approach. So we have those situations where, okay, if we've got 3 positives in the school within a certain time frame, that school, there's metrics for that. We may have some scenarios where the contact tracing becomes so big that instead of saying, we called every parent, we just say, let's hit the brakes on this. It just makes sense. And then we look at what the next step is. The other thing I would say is if sickness is the cause of me reaching out to the committee to say, we've got to close some buildings, the concern is bigger than just, okay, we're remote. It's based on people not being well and people having symptoms and people being positive. And, we have to consider that metric of not just do we have enough staff to run school that day, but what's the health of our staff? And is it responsible to say, well, you're going to teach remote today. I'm sorry, you're really sick. I think we're going to be more thoughtful with that. So to answer your question, I'm ready to make that decision if I think the conditions show. But I also think the committee certainly can weigh in on that at any point in time.
Ms. Wright?
Thank you. I just want to be responsive to the conversation that's happening right now, not to be obnoxious, but I think when we think about the state, having sat on MEPRI, which is the Policy Research Institute for Maine Education, Lewiston is not like other school units. We are unique in a number of ways, and I think those unique circumstances contribute to my distinct, not necessarily disagreement, but just I'm dubious of strictly following the state recommendations for green, yellow, red. I want us to look at our unique circumstance, which I think the administration is doing, of course, but I don't want to be too reliant on the state calling the shots because we have a downtown population where folks live in close contact to each other, and families interact with each other in a way that doesn't necessarily happen in a suburb or a rural location. And so I think we just have to be slightly more sensitive to that reality of our community. Yeah.
And I would agree. But we're not just looking for the state info. I mean, I agree with you.
Any other discussion? Agenda item, are you done, Jake? Agenda item number 8, public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, or affiliation with Lewiston Public Schools.
Hi. Is that on?
Yes.
I'm Nancy Philbrook. I'm the math coach at Geiger Elementary School, where I've worked for 7 years. In the past few meetings, I've heard people present and said that they were reading for somebody else because they were reluctant to come here because of retaliation. I felt the same way, but I came on my own because of the concern that this board has shared about somebody else thinking they might be retaliated against, concern about the emotional well-being of our staff, and concerns about the workload of our staff. So given that you're concerned about that, I thought I would come myself and take that risk of retaliation. And also with all of your concerns, I'd just like you to think for a minute about how I felt last week when, for the 7th year in a row, this board questioned what I do while I'm at work. Yet, at that very same meeting, you created a new position without a job description, without a list of responsibilities that that person would do. No discussion about any legal ramifications that that type of job might have for this. I gotta tell you, I didn't feel appreciated. I didn't feel like that you believed I was a wonderful employee that you have said and talked about. And I didn't discern any concern from you about my workload increase or my emotional well-being. This is the 7th year in a row that the value and integrity of what I do for work has been questioned, and often multiple times in the same year. I have one question for you. How often have you asked for detailed information about what any other subset of this bargaining unit does in the school district? Have you ever asked for detailed information about what the ELL teachers do? Have you ever asked what the special ed teachers do? Have you ever asked what the 3rd grade teachers do? Now, I haven't been to every school board meeting in the last 7 years, but to my knowledge, those questions have never been asked. I'd like to tell you what I do. When I come to work every day, I do the job that this district hired me to do. And I will tell you that this year, I have a significantly increased workload. It has negatively affected my work and home balance as it has the other teachers in this district. And it has put a strain on my emotional health. So as you share your concerns for the members of this staff, of this district, I'd like you to remember that the coaches in this district are also employed by us. And I just want to reiterate that the retaliation that I'm worried about is not from the administration. Because since I've been here, the 3 superintendents, the 3 assistant superintendents, the 4 chief academic officers, and the 4 building administrators that I've worked under have fully supported me, respected me, and appreciated the work that I do. I fear retaliation from you because you have questioned what I do for 7 years. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other public comments, and there's no one on the online platform. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So. Second.
Ward 1?
Yes.
2?
Yes.
3?
Yes.
5?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Ray?
No.